Thank you, and thank you, Dirk, for sharing. I think it's super interesting to hear about how you practice it at E.ON, and also learning from you as well. So, Ludvig Liljeqvist, I work with IKEA, Inca Group. We're the largest IKEA retailer. I'll come to that. So, apologies for some of you might have seen some parts of this before, but for those who haven't, that's very much better. Someone is laughing. I can see that now. But what I will do is I'll share Ingvar Kamprad, so the founder of IKEA. This is the testament of the furniture dealer. We will only move ahead only by constantly asking ourselves how what we are doing today can be done better tomorrow. And the better tomorrow part is much where I will focus today on sharing and how we approach that. So but first, just to give a short intro to IKEA. We're coming up to 80 years now, so we've been there since 1943. IKEA, for those who didn't know, is Ingvar Kamprad, is the little farm he grew up at, Älmtaryd, and the small village next to it. It made up the brand name as you know today. So it's all coming from his name and where he's coming from, which is in the deep forest of Småland, which I know some of us in this room, actually, my colleagues, have actually lived there. So have I at one point. The vision of IKEA and for Inca Group is to create a better everyday life for the many people. And I'll come back to that, how the vision translates into our foresighting practices and our insights. The other part is to mention the two eternity part that always sits with us is the vision and the values. So the values is how we're recruited into the company. It also steers us, becomes the compass. So it's all about caring for people and planet, which we'll touch on a lot, and also a little bit of the simplicity part, I think. Inca Group, Ingvar Kamprad Group, is the largest IKEA retailer. We operate IKEA in Germany, in the US, in China, and so forth. So we represent about 90-something% of the IKEA total turnover. But we also have other businesses, some 200 businesses. We have a shopping center in 16 of those, which is quite unique for a retailer, that you own the shopping center next to it. We also have investment arm, which is the other big. So we invest in minority stake in companies, but also into energy, for example, to kind of offset scope 1, 2 as part of our operations and business. So we have 3 legs to stand on, which is retail, centers, and investment arm. My role in the group function of strategy, development, innovation is to look on the outside. What is happening outside the world in past, present, and futures? I will talk more about the futures, but just to ground us where we are today, I will show a short movie, which is going to be 2 minutes, where we're coming from as humans on planet Earth. And hopefully we tested it, and I have good technical support.
This is the story of how one species changed a planet. The latest chapter of our story begins in England 250 years ago. Fueled by coal, then oil, several brilliant inventions appeared. They ignited the Industrial Revolution, which spread like wildfire through Europe, North America, Japan, then elsewhere. The great railways, then cars and highways, connected people across the globe. Medical discoveries saved millions of lives. New artificial fertilizers meant we could feed more people. Population rose rapidly. But this was nothing compared with what was to come. The 1950s marked the beginning of the Great Acceleration. Globalization, marketing, tourism, and huge investments helped fuel enormous growth. People swarmed to cities, which became even more powerful engines of creativity. In a single lifetime, the well-being of millions has improved beyond measure. Health, wealth, security, longevity, never have so many had so much. Yet 1 billion are malnourished. In a single lifetime, we have grown into a phenomenal global force. We move more sediment and rock annually than all natural processes, such as erosion and rivers. We manage 3/4 of all land outside the ice sheets. Greenhouse gas levels this high have not been seen for over 1 million years. Temperatures are increasing. We have made a hole in the ozone layer. We are losing biodiversity. Many of the world's deltas are sinking due to damming, mining, and other causes. Sea level is rising. Ocean acidification is a real threat. We are altering Earth's natural cycles. We have entered the Anthropocene, a new geological epoch dominated by humanity. This relentless pressure on our planet risks unprecedented destabilization. But our creativity, energy, and industry offer hope. We have shaped our past. We are shaping our present. We can shape our future. You and I are part of this story. We are the first generation to realize this new responsibility. As the population grows to 9 billion, we must find a safe operating space for humanity, for the sake of future generations. Welcome to the Anthropocene.
So for some of you might be familiar that humans have been in the Holocene. So we now, for the last 12,000 years, we've been there. It's been quite humid, hasn't changed a lot. And if you hear the news, a lot of things are starting to happening now. And that is when we come into the Anthropocene, which has been the last 70 years or something, when you see the human-made system, that's energy systems, or social systems, economical systems, financial systems, are all starting to affect the systems around us, which are supporting us, the Earth systems. And you can see these graphs just represent the Great Acceleration, which is seeing how our systems are now changing exponentially, and the Earth systems in relation to that. The other thing is technology. It's been there for 50 years. The Moore's Law is an empirical finding that both the technology is developing or doubling capacity every 12 to 16 months. Now with AI development, it's being challenged a bit, that it's actually moving quicker than we thought. But it's just showing you what I want to show when I talk about futures. There's a past to relate to. We're coming to a period of time where humans are really changing systems, and we're changing things exponentially. And the other thing is, when we change things, we're realizing we're not in control, but we have agency, as the movie showed. That we can, with the size of us, we can choose to do worse or better. And I'm interested to show you and engage you in what better means. When we work with Foresight and to share our practice in it, and there's a so-called multiple futures. There's a Voroscone, you probably have seen it. It explains you there could be different futures in different time horizons. The other one exercise we use is called world building, which I mentioned earlier today, is that there are different frameworks on how to view the world, but world building is a technique we borrowed from the entertainment industry. So how you build a world, which is very holistic as a platform. And then we use scientific research, people. We use something called design fiction. So talking about the future, we know that nobody remembers the future, but not only when you start feeling something about the future that connects you, that's when you start acting, and it becomes memorable. And the last part is, which my colleague will talk a little bit to, is innovation and strategy. Those are, I should probably add now, because we tested it also on market developments, in how our markets are performing, like envisioning futures for them, but also to partnerships and communication, how we use it. And I guess this is an example when we start sharing and when we come together. But innovation and strategy. The research questions, which I haven't put under here, is the vision. So we have to create a better everyday life for the many people. The research question going into these multiple futures and different time horizons is what is the everyday life for the many people? Because that's where we have a role to play with IKEA and Inca. When I talk about multiple futures, this becomes a crash course, but we look at many different futures. I've gone into the possible future, plausible. I've gone into space opera, when you go into 100 years into the future. What is the science fiction or climate fictions kind of the different futures? They give you something. The projected future is where we talk a lot about. This is very dystopian if you come into that. But the one I will focus on, where I've seen a lot of value, which I share more about, is the preferable future, so the future we want. So now again, coming back to the agency part, how do we exercise the agency towards something better? Then there is something to be aware of. Foresighting animals, the things happen. We have the pandemic, economic recession, so forth, which could impact where things are going in the future. So you would never know that. There's so known and unknowns. The unknowns could be the pandemic, whereas the known ones are climate change. It's been here for 100 years. We all know about it. Scientific community known it, for 100 years. As they put it now, it's more for the salesmen to do the pitch for the climate change and fixing it, rather than the scientific community trying to convince everyone that there is a problem. But two things, when we talk about the future, talk about time horizon. I normally land in 10 years. I'm getting input now, we should look maybe on 30 years out, because that's also with the 2050 net zero ambition and so forth. But 10 to 30 years, probably with the time horizon I operate. Close enough for everyone to experience, but also long enough to see some of the exponential development. The other thing is which future are we talking about? I will be talking much about the projected and preferable future. So I won't go into any of the other future states, which all have its value, because the more futures you look at, the more you're realizing you could build on whatever could happen if you're building resilience, for example, and so forth. The world building exercise, it was funny, Tom Cruise, Minority Report, is one of the many kind of movies made out of the world building exercise which they use. It was actually launched here in Germany, Berlin, I think 21 years now ago. So he looks the same, Tom Cruise it seems, but the whole thing about, you can see here when we talk about the social technology, like the social, the political scale and so forth, and there's a different scales which we use, which is also called the 7 foundation model, which is kind of look how the future's affected people, but also the planetary. So we kind of scale it up to make it much more impactful, which is similar to, I think, what you shared, Dirk, before, like there's a scale of the impact of such. But that also helps different people to engage in it in different ways. The science fiction, I was into science fiction, so I thought it was super interesting to talking to MIT, and I got into contact with some other like storytellers. But looking at the reports, nobody really reads the big reports about the futures, like IPCC reports and so forth. So we went into the journey to kind of democratize the futures. And one of the simplest way, we got into contact with a partner who did comic books, and it was actually absorbed by the company who did actually the scientific part of what is life and society beyond 2030 in US, China, and India. And then we had a narrative technique where we kind of come together with the science and storytelling. So this is Pooja, how she experienced Mumbai in 2030, so forth. What would be the everyday life of her? And we embed it through so-called narrative persuasion techniques, where you can have, in any stories told, there is something embedded as a message to take away. So we embeds the key messages, and that became it much more accessible to people rather than read a big report in 200 pages, which we still have in the back, but this is a way to kind of make it much more engaging. And when people feel, they start to remember. And that's a key thing that we learned through the process. Then, what are we doing this and so forth? There is something in the vision when you can inspire and to make people to act collectively to make it happen. It's somewhere it's like we all work in companies or we have a family or relationship where like you realize where I'm standing today, where am I going? Should I get the 4th child or not? That's my problem today. My partner wants another kid. I already have 3 and 2 dogs. But going all that, and I was like, how do we, I won't go into that, I realize now. It was a bad example. But what I wanted to say is, it is something to make people feel where are we going and how do we get there? And then first of all, you need to realize where you're standing today. But the vision part is interesting because it served human over the Anthropocene for many times to have a clear vision where we want to go with things. We want to go to the moon. It's going to be hard. We don't know how to get there, but we will get there. Like the famous moonshot talk by JFK in Houston, Texas, I believe. But 10 years later, he managed to go there. But it was a clear vision to kind of collectively come together and make it happen. We have something called, we don't have only the vision about creating better everyday life for the many people, but we have the ambition of becoming people and planet positive, which is a better everyday life for the many people within the planetary boundaries. So still like it should be within a just setting. We have 3 big problems we want to solve, wicked problems as we refer to them. Climate change, inequality, and unsustainable consumption. We have intervention points towards that where we have agency to come in. I won't dwell on this one so much, but I will. We're optimistic about the future, and we tend to be a little bit brainwashed in that in our company, but I think we're always trying to do it better. But the reality is, I will touch on the no part of the presentation, like we talked about the past and the present and the future. But the people, when we start looking at the global risk of the future, like when the experts and so on come together, you can see that for the next 10 years, you're going to see like it is climate. In the near term is cost of living crisis, which is felt, I believe, here in Germany and most part of the world, where everything's going around in the world. But then you have climate. So there is things that are worrying people, and it's not looking good. When you go into the UN Human Development Report, there's an index we can assess where is human developing when it comes to health, education, and so forth. And the first time in 30 years, we're seeing a decline in it. And then it also states something interesting to add to that, like they assessed 3 languages, 125 years back of books and so forth, publications. How do we speak it? What are the things that is coming through? And you can see the negative part about the world is just also going exponentially. So how we consume the world's news and information is not very positive in the end. IPCC report, they had the synthesis report just released a month ago or so, but there are different ways where the scientific community tells we could be going. We have the SDG, we have the net zero target and so forth. But what is interesting when you start looking at that scientific community coming together, is when you see all the trend of now you need to reverse your thinking because the other one was up in this other way. But you can see the red graph up here that still when you see what the governments and states are agreeing to per COP27 and so forth, you can see the implemented policies by them and also businesses. We're still not hitting the target, and I shouldn't say target, it's a limit, 1.5 degree future. Because after that, the impact of that to society and people are so hard to imagine and how it's going to be, yeah. That's why I think the Lost and Damaged Fund has just been the one that they really agreed on last to kind of bump up a lot because we need to build resilience in relation to if we're not meeting that limit, we're going to head to what we're heading here, to not like a 2+ degree future, which doesn't sound much, but when you go into the details of that, it's going to be felt by the global south a lot more than the global north, but we will also be impacted by that. And I think the pandemic and the cost of living crisis now is a good example to see more of that to come, and we're going to have probably the most, I think the latest now, the next 3 to 5 years is going to be the hottest on record. So a little bit doom and gloom about the future. So then we thought, let's do something good. Let's go out and see if we can find some good stories or visions of a better future. What is those? So we went to a partner called Arizona State University. They are a Center for the Science Imagination. They have a publication, or they have done, this is the 3rd edition. It's called Everything Changed from Margaret Atwood, which is when climate change is not climate change, it's everything changed. So if you've seen Margaret Atwood, she's a famous author, but she was part of shaping this. And this is called science fiction or climate fiction. So we took into this exercise a process of let's co-create a better future, and we wanted a community of storytellers around the world to like, what is a better everyday life within the planetary boundaries? And we shaped that provocation. Arizona sent it out. We got submission from 70-something countries, almost 600 stories about a better future. We read through them all. It was all dystopian. Like the only thing they could imagine about the future was, and that's how storytellers are. When you tell a story, it needs to be a conflict in mind that you kind of pivot from. But everything was catastrophic events. In the end, this anthology of 10 stories, which were the winners in the end, they all tell stories of in the next 10 years or 100 years into the future. But we're trying to co-create the future, which was, in our eyes, a lot of experience, a total failure. Because we couldn't come to the point, what is better than? Like, where are we pointing our efforts towards? And that's how we come into, go back to ourselves and taking the learnings from all these future exercises to create what is a positive future world. And this is a manifesto from that positive future world as you would live in it. So we're good ancestors, we share our plenty and so forth. But more interesting, you probably recognize some of the things like the planetary boundaries, the social foundations based on the planetary boundaries by Johan Rockström and Stockholm Resilience Center, but also the social foundation, which is how Kate Raworth evolved from that. And just 2 weeks ago, 2 weeks ago, we have now the Just Corridor, which is a new Earth kind of expansion on the planetary boundaries, which was released 2 weeks ago, I think. So what we did here is we combined a lot of techniques, the donut economy, the planetary boundaries, into the world-building framework. So you have these points of view, which I think is like, what is the future of energy? What is the future of work? Future well-being? So it becomes a platform, so where do you want to go? And it's not, and I was told, not middle-aged white men deciding where the future is going. It should be done by the community. And the community in this way, we did a process of involving youth and experts. So they looked at all the trends and all the reports we have on projected future, say, what do you like about this future and what can't we not change? But what do you like? Do you want to bring into a better future? What do you want to leave behind? And what do you want to add? And like you can see, youth communities very much like nature. That's our most important topic. Expert could have much more, like Kate Raworth, had much more ambitious, like a systematic transition views. We need to change the system from linear to circular to even become regenerative. So you can see the experts and youth coming together in this process we did to kind of populate the points of view of them, what is future well-being or future of planetary health. And if you join the session later today, you will get to access some of these contents that we sliced off this world-building framework, as we refer to it. But then we also did something. We made people imagine. We took in storytellers to see what is this future, what could it look and feel like. And this is just a snapshot of the video or the story about Anushka and the multicolored canoe, which shows a solar punk future. So at IKEA, we're always trying to create our movements. I'm sure you do, like, we want to be the initiator of things. In this case, there's been different movements and artistic ways to explain futures. You have cyberpunk, steampunk, and then cyberpunk, and then solarpunk. Solarpunk has been around for the last 10 years, and it has its own manifesto, but it's both innovation but also a way to tell stories. So if you see the new Marvel movies, when multiverse, I think it's a Spider-Man who steps into a solarpunk future. Suddenly it's very green and lush, and you can see these solar panels and so forth. And then you have David Attenborough's like breaking boundaries. In the last 2 minutes, he shows like it's come to a point when humans learn to live with nature, and he shows Amazon forestry with drones and so forth. That's also solar punk. So a lot of the envisioning part of the visual parts is now being taken from solar punk. So Google that and you will see the manifesto, which kind of describes it. But it's a very grassroots movement the last 10 years. So we use that to describe our story. What could it be when we need to become more resilient and like more in harmony with nature, but also with ourselves, with humans as such. Probably forgot to tell a lot of things, but a couple of key takeaways. When I don't preach the future, I like future thinking because I combine a lot of technique of design and strategy, innovation techniques, but foresighting as such, it is about nobody knows the future. It can go so many ways. So it's about mindset. And the mindset I want to communicate is agency in yourself. And what I choose to do today, different from yesterday. As a company, if you're big, if you have an impact in the energy sector, you have a role to choose if you do something for good or for worse. And I think like hearing what your plans are, you're really exercising towards kind of transitions into something better, which I think it's what we need to come to. But it's also accepting some of the damages done. Whatever we do different from today to tomorrow, the next 5 years is going to be the hottest years on Earth on record, which means we need to create adaptation. Adaptation is resilience. In resilience thinking, if you go into that, I would advocate for social ecological resilience thinking, which is when you see the social system and ecological system, how they're learning and building together as a system. And you can find that on Stockholm Resilience Center. But then you have and that is resilience. I don't know. The best one I heard from Tyson is like, it is about how to take a punch and get back up is the essence of resilience. But foresighting is a good combination because you can't predict if you're getting punched or not. But that foresighting technique could at least prepare you for being punched. I won't go into boxing anymore, but mitigation is the other part. It's like, how do you mitigate for something better? How do you create? I would say sustainable, as much as we speak about it, it's sustaining yourself in an existing system. So I want to be here for another 80 years or such. I think that's not viable. And if you hear all the research around it, we're trying to go from linear, like sustain yourself in a linear system to a circular system. A circular system is still good, better, I think. Even better is when you start talking about regenerative. When you give back more than you take. So if you see biodiversity loss, we lost, I think, since the last 30, 40 years, we lost about 69% of biodiversity loss caused by humans. So of course, how do we can't reverse that in any way, but we can start looking at, in the systems we operate as a business or sector, how do we give back more than we take? So you need to work on both, and there are sweet spots in this, which I normally mention that. I heard a question about decentralization. One of the key takeaways of the future, in all futures, is to decentralize. Because decentralized build resilience is one of the core principles of social ecological resilience. But it also helps mitigate. So if you go into circular, like local manufacturing and supply chain and so forth, then you also have the mitigation to transit into new systems, such as a circular system. So one of the core things to focus and look at if you want to survive is decentralization. And then you could find your angle in that. The last part is imagine. Human has the capacity to imagine what better looks like. So we should use that. Collectively, we should all come together to say, and I think it was one of the projects we did, like we should all, in the end, the world and the sectors coming together and say, there are 3 different futures we can choose from. And I think the UN report, development report, was clear that they also kind of self-reflected on themselves. They all come with this doom and gloom, like IPCC report. And they're now saying, like, we can't only focus on this very quantified futures of something worse will come. We need to kind of also exercise desirable futures. So if you start reading this report, and what I'm trying to say here, we can't only talk about everything will go shit and we will adapt to that. We will also need to do something better. And what better is with the agency we have. And we need to imagine what better looks and feels like in your life, in your company, in your sector, or collectively together, I think. And that's what we're trying to do in, 15 minutes or so. I don't know. But I stop there and say, yeah, let's start to imagine and assemble a positive future. Thank you.
Could you give some examples how IKEA and its products are reacting on all these challenges? What precisely do you have now on your map?
Very good question. I think some applications of this one right now. Recently we did one with the markets to see how market with their agency could shift towards something better. So we took they redone the whole process I explained in the market. They invited youth and experts come together. What they learned there is that they needed to quantify on a local scale, which I think we talk a lot, of the data points, where things are heading. And now they're reinforcing how they meet the customer, where the future customers or people will be living in that community. So that's more from a retail perspective, how we become more accessible to those people, and also those future interests and behaviors that they will have. And that's also how so IKEA has a range about 8,000 to 10,000 products about, I'm looking at my colleague from range here. But then they could adjust the range to be much more locally relevant, not only here and now, but also for the future generation, because a lot of it is to kind of tap into those pockets. So that's more, I guess, the commercial application in the market. The other example I can give is, we also did simultaneously now, lately, one of our businesses, not IKEA, but another big part of the group, we then assess their innovation portfolio. So their challenge here now is the business model. It's suffering under the pressure of competition a lot. So they wanted to understand what is the future business model we need to have. So then we placed the business model into this future, and then we did a backcasting techniques. What are the business model shift they needed to do in order to kind of be a business model which would survive both in a projected but a preferable future. Then on some products we have in the range which speaks to the future, decentralization, we sell solar panels, we're in the energy business, I believe with E.ON in some of our markets, so we sell solar panels and energy subscription I think in 12 of our markets. The other one is of course, I won't go into all the examples, but I think some of the things that I like is the energy part of our business. I like, of course, having sustainable materials, which is the supply chain of things, but much more in the output part, and the behavioral part, where the many people, because the thing that comes across, because I also lead the research for our climate and inequality research, is that the many people, the research shows this going worst. When we track people's behavior in the climate action space, for example, they're not acting more. And the barriers for them is that it's too costly, I don't know enough, I don't know what to do, and so forth. And that comes across all the 32 markets we researched the last kind of 8 years, every second year. And I think that's where companies, ours, like, we need to make it affordable for people to act. So that's our major interventions for a better future, that we kind of, it's not for the few to kind of contribute towards a better future. I tried to answer as best I could, but we can speak later, and I give some more.
Okay, thank you.
I know we're out of time. I'd had a poll question, and hopefully, if you feel entitled, maybe I cued it too much, but do you feel, I'm interested to hear, do you feel optimistic about the future? You're all coming from different industries and different lives and different geographies possibly, but if you could share that, that'd be great, because that also helps me prone the exercise doing later. Thank you. I think together we could probably in the exercise feel a little bit more optimistic when you're trying to imagine what a future product or service would be for you in this better future. But with that said, a big thank you for everyone, and have a great rest of the day.